We often think that developed countries provide greater happiness to their citizens. But sometimes these great nations have a dark side that no one knows about. Stay with us until the end of the video to discover how Japan has a large commercial industry and is an economic giant. But at the same time, they have a forest that they nickname the Suicide Forest. Japan's big stars are its densely populated cities, and it is not a country that can be imagined as a sparsely populated mountainous desert. However, about 70% of Japan is made up of forests and mountains that are not suitable for agriculture or life in them. There are more than 100 active volcanoes, and its highest mountain is the famous Mount Fuji, with an altitude of almost 4,000 meters. Japan is known as a global economic power, with a highly industrialized and technologically advanced economy. During the second half of the 20th century, the country experienced impressive economic growth, known as the Japanese economic miracle. Japan has excelled in sectors such as electronics, automotive, and technology, being home to global companies such as Sony, Toyota, and Panasonic. Additionally, the country is recognized for its focus on innovation and the quality of its products. Despite facing challenges such as an aging population and competition from other emerging economies, Japan remains a major economic force globally. Its position as an economic power is reflected in its high standard of living, its advanced infrastructure, and its presence in international markets. Not everything is perfect. Strange things happen here, from festivals like ones about nudes. Japan is known for its non-stop festivals, but Hadaka Matsuri must be one of the strangest. Thousands of Japanese men strip naked in public to ensure a year full of fortune. The largest Matsuri is held in Okayama, where approximately 9,000 men descend on their fundoshi. Extravagant, don't you think? And they take this to various areas, such as food, eel-flavored ice cream, and green tea. Kit Kats are just two of the weird and wonderful flavors you can find in Japan. Kit Kats are the most popular candy. The name Kit Kat sounds similar to Kidokatsu, a Japanese saying meaning good luck. You can also try Kit Kats flavored with edamame, wasabi, and ginger ale, but it has another less-known side. Human trafficking is a consolidated criminal market in the country. Men, women, and children in Japan and abroad are victims of sex trafficking and forced labor. Victims are often coerced through debt-based tactics, threats of violence or deportation, blackmail, confiscation of passports and other documents, and other psychological methods. Foreign workers, men and women, foreign students, and runaway adolescents and children are especially vulnerable to exploitation, with traffickers, organized crime groups, and immigration intermediaries playing an important role. The COVID-19 pandemic has only made the situation worse, as traffickers increasingly use social media platforms to lure vulnerable women and girls into paid dating services. Japan is not a major destination for human trafficking due to its geographic isolation and strict immigration mechanisms. People from South and Southeast Asia, China, and the Pacific are the most common victims of this crime, and often find work in the country's informal economy. The number of human trafficking cases remains relatively low, but the number of illegal stays has increased in recent years. Criminal organizations, such as the Yakuza and the Chinese Triads, facilitate human trafficking in Japan, and occasional violence and exploitation brings the problem to the forefront. Japanese organized crime groups are known for extorting people, including business owners, in exchange for protection. Recently, Yakuza groups have tried to hide their identities and use individuals who are not formally part of the gang to avoid being identified by the police. The introduction of Yakuza exclusion ordinances more than a decade ago has curbed extortion to protect criminals, but Yakuza influence remains prevalent in businesses that are not well protected by law, such as clubs, hostess, and game rooms. Furthermore, new emerging criminal groups called hangir are also increasingly carrying out extortion activities in the areas they control. The practice of sokaya, a unique form of extortion that targets large businesses rather than small business owners and individuals, has largely disappeared. Remember to like this video and share it with other people so they can see the other side of Japan. Heroin use in Japan is limited and much less common than cannabis or other stimulant drugs. In recent years, the number of incidents involving heroin and cocaine has increased, but the number remains small compared to similarly rich and populous countries. Cocaine comes to the country mainly from North America, and although consumption remains low, it is consumed more than heroin. In general, the market can be considered to have minimal influence on society. In Japan, possession of cannabis is highly criminalized, even in small quantities. However, the COVID-19 pandemic and associated restrictions have led to an increase in cannabis trade. Cannabis is one of the most popular drugs in Japan, and most of it is imported from other countries. The modus operandi of buyers and sellers has changed. Drugs are ordered by phone and delivered by car. Despite increased trade, the amount of cannabis seized remains lower than in other developed countries. The synthetic drug trade has flourished in Japan, particularly methamphetamine, which is sold at a much higher price than in neighboring countries. The drug is smuggled through various methods from regions such as Africa, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Central and South America. Although methamphetamine accounts for the majority of the drug market in Japan, the number of offenders has decreased in recent years, and the drug trade remains limited. Heroin use in Japan is limited and much less common than cannabis or other stimulant drugs. In recent years, the number of incidents involving heroin and cocaine has increased, but the number remains small compared to similarly rich and populous countries. The suicide rate in Japan is 16 per 100,000 inhabitants, well above the world average, which is 9.27 per 100,000 inhabitants. It is important to note that compared to murders, the number of suicides is considerably higher. For every person murdered, 63.7 people committed suicide. Academic pressure and fear of harassment in schools are some of the factors that contribute to this problem. But one of the most worrying things is that there is a forest in this country that has been called the suicide forest. Mount Fuji is not directly called Suicide Forest, but Aokigahara Forest, located at the base of Mount Fuji, is known by that nickname. Aokigahara is a sadly famous place because many Japanese people decide to end their lives there. The forest is a deep, dark sea of trees where it is easy to get lost. Literature and history contribute to its sinister reputation. Some believe its fame as a suicide site dates back to the 19th century, when poor families abandoned their elderly or sick relatives in the forest, practicing a form of euthanasia called ubisute in Japanese. Additionally, the forest has a historical association with demons from Japanese mythology, and a novel published in 1960 also contributed to its notoriety. Its formation is due to lava flows from the repeated eruptions of Mount Fuji during the years 800 to 1883, with the eruption of 864 being the one that contributed the most to creating what we know today as Aokigahara. It is a dark and mysterious place where wildlife is almost non-existent and silence reigns in its depths. It is always important to remember that life is a precious gift, and there are resources available for those who need help during difficult times. Remember that if you want to know more information like this, you can subscribe to our channel and activate notifications so as not to miss videos like the country of blonde and single women due to lack of men. Could you tell us which one it is? Well, run, and we'll wait for you on a next adventure.